Hello everyone, whether you are part of my current audience or someone new, welcome to the first actual video I'm posting. So I recently started trying to learn animation and I wanted to document my learning process as well as showing how I approach it. So this is me learning how to animate. I don't normally do videos like this, so I tried to make a script for this so I knew what to talk about. So I apologize if what I say or the wording I use doesn't quite make sense. I'm still pretty new to this. Before I start, I just wanted to say that this isn't necessarily a tutorial or a how-to video. It's just my process and talking about what I'm learning and trying to do through my experiences. For example, I'm not going to be going over any of the art tools in the animating programs as I'm already somewhat experienced with those from other art programs such as Procreate. I've always wanted to learn some animation since I tried making little stop motion videos when I was a kid. Some of my biggest inspirations now that finally pushed me to try my hand at animations are people like Jaden Animations, Domix, as well as all the anime and beautiful animations coming out these days. The only experience I have before this animation is the few animations that are currently posted on my account and my socials. The first thing I needed to think about was what animation software I was going to use. I'm currently on a slightly older iPad, so I needed to find something that was going to work with my hardware. After some basic research, I narrowed my options down to two programs, Procreate Dreams and ToonSquid. I'd actually already owned Procreate Dreams as I pre-ordered it when it was announced since I always wanted to learn to animate, and I thought it would be a perfect program to use as someone who already has experience in Procreate. ToonSquid was also highly recommended from the little bit of research that I did. One of the biggest things was that it was a one-time purchase instead of a subscription like many other animating apps. For me, the biggest difference in the two programs was the user interface. Procreate Dreams implemented a more non-conventional user interface that had a much more intuitive feel to the way you use an iPad and a touchscreen. ToonSquid had a more mainstream user interface that felt more along the lines of a professional program one might use on a computer. After comparing the two, I ultimately decided to use ToonSquid. I felt that even though Procreate Dreams and controls were very unique to an iPad and made the screen feel less cluttered, the intuitive design was a bit much as I feel the program doesn't show how to use itself enough, and I think I would constantly be looking up how to do simple things relating to the program rather than learning and animating. One of the big examples for that is navigating the timeline required 1, 2, or even 3 fingers depending on what you wanted to do, which even though that is something unique to a touchscreen and an iPad, it felt strange as many other apps and user interfaces use a single finger or maybe 2 to navigate throughout the app. Procreate, for example, uses only 1 finger to navigate most of the user interface, and from what I've experienced, it only uses 2 or 3 fingers to undo or redo. A lot of other options and features are felt weirdly placed in the program, such as the onion skin option being hidden under the timecode, which seemed really hidden. ToonSquid felt much more mainstream and everything felt present in its user interface. I didn't feel lost when I was using it, and I also think that if I ever move to a different program, the experience and UI of ToonSquid will translate easier into those other programs. Next, I had to do a bit of research so I had some idea of what I was doing when I was animating, as well as having some idea of how to use the software that I chose. I really didn't do much though, because my main goal was to get straight into the animation. The only research I really did relating to animation was watching the 12 Principles of Animation series by Alan Becker tutorial. If you are also wanting to get animation, this seems like a great series of videos that explains each principle somewhat in depth while also being short and concise on the subject. The whole series was less than 30 minutes. The only other thing that I watched was how to use ToonSquid, which went over the basic user interface and tools available in the ToonSquid animation program. That way I wasn't completely lost when I opened up the app. Once I got into ToonSquid, I pretty much went straight into animations and learning the basics of the program. It felt a bit choppy and buggy at first, but I got used to it. It wasn't until the end of me making my animation, I finally realized I probably should check out the settings and see if there's anything I should change to fit my current setup. The main thing that felt buggy to me was when I tried to use my fingers to zoom in or zoom out or undo. The app would prioritize my fingers as a drawing gesture and end up making random dots or lines. The settings had a perfect option to turn off the finger drawing, which made the whole animation process much easier. I wish I would have found it more towards the beginning of my animation instead of when I was finishing up, but either way, it still made it much easier. I also messed around with the fill settings, but I'll get into that a little bit later. There were a lot of other settings that seemed really convenient if I got more used to the program and animating, but I didn't understand them enough to mess with them. So, now onto the animation. I decided to reanimate a scene from Bocchi the Rock, but with Chainsaw Man characters. I wanted to try to animate something that was easy and I could practice some of the animation principles, but wasn't so boring, such as drawing a bouncing ball or facial reactions or simple body movement. In particular, some of the principles I wanted to try and practice during this were staging and placing characters and putting the scene together in a good way. This would be similar to composition and video making, which I have some sort of idea about. Straight ahead versus pose-to-pose animation, which is either animating drawing frame by frame or drawing pose by pose and then filling in the gaps between each main pose of the animation, followed through an overlapping action, which would be secondary actions to the character, such as the hair moving if a character jumps, the hair would move slightly slower and react to the gravity at a different time than the character's main body, slow in and slow out timing, as well as some sort of exaggeration, and solid drawing, which would be knowing the 3 dimensionals of your character so that if they change poses, it looks 3-dimensional and not like a 2D animation. After a little bit of work, I decided for my animation to be 24 frames per second based off the source material of the Bocchi the Rock scene, as well as a resolution of 720. It's a higher resolution than what I've been working in before, so I'd be able to achieve a much smoother looking animation while also not being too detailed. During this time I had to figure out how to insert a video. It was pretty easy, although there was some issues. After inserting the video, I tried to cut it to the points where I wanted and only keep certain parts of the video. However, cutting the video would never work quite right. The first piece that I would cut off would stay fine, however the piece that I was trying to keep would always retime itself and duplicate the part I was trying to cut off. I don't know exactly how to explain it, but I didn't even bother dealing with it in the app. I ended up just taking the video into a separate program, whether that be the Photos application or CapCut, and I just cut the video down to have what I wanted instead and just reinserted that part. After inserting the video, I just traced the basic silhouette of the character for each frame. That way I had a basic blank character to build upon when I needed to add features and character design. This was really easy in the timeline. This process ended up taking much longer than I was hoping it would, and even though there wasn't much to learn in animation here, I kind of got a feel of what it would be like to animate frame by frame. It was just a lot more boring to me because I was drawing something that was already there and already existed instead of drawing my own unique characters and or animation. Next was character design. I was going to use Asa as the main character for this piece, so I pulled some references of Asa's character design, as well as the art style of Bocchi, and I did my best to combine them. This was my first time making any sort of character sheet, and to be honest, I thought it was pretty fun. I also tried different variations of facial expressions to use throughout the animation. I would have done a full character sheet that would include the side profiles, back profile, as well as 3/4 profiles, but since I knew what the animation was already and I didn't need to go that far, I ended up just doing the front profile in a few different poses. In her final character sheet, I took this out, but I also wanted to keep in mind certain parts of her design that would be affected during movement, which were her skirt, bow, and pigtail. Even though these were going to be small movements, this is where the follow-through and overlapping principle of animation were going to show, and I really wanted to pay attention to those. Coming back to the animation app, the next thing was to use my references and character sheet to draw Asa on each frame. On the silhouette layer, I also added red arrows to show myself the movement of the character so I can add the follow-through actions based off the movement and gravity of the scene. Working in the timeline was pretty easy to me, as it was like working with layers in a drawing app, except you also have to deal with the dimensions of time, going from left to right on your layers and not just what is on top or below each layer. Unfortunately, I guess I didn't film much of this process, but it really was just me drawing the same way as when I made the character sheet. The onion skin was pretty easy, as it allows you to see multiple ghost frames either before or after or both of the current animation frames you are working on. This allowed me to kind of see what the previous frame was like, so I can animate based off of that. Since it was a pretty simple animation, I only really had one previous onion skin frame show up so that I could see what follow-through actions I needed to include. I did the same process for Yoru, except it was only 2 frames, since it was inspired by an Azumanga Daioh scene. I also made a background based off the scene from the chapter. I took the manga panel in Procreate and did my best to copy it and extend it, as well as simplifying it so it didn't blow out the more simplistic style of the characters. Only thing I needed to do for the Denji side of things was draw the back of his body for the main Asa scene, and then his reaction for the shot after Asa. For his reaction shot, I got to play around with timing of his blinking and react. I made each drawing for his blink last a single frame, which felt the most realistic to me and not too slow. As for his reaction, I tried and taken into account the principle of solid drawings here. I wanted to make his head bob feel 3-dimensional instead of just his facial features moving. I wanted to make it look like his whole head moved. I tried to achieve this best as I could for such a small movement by redrawing his head each frame and changing the angle just a bit. Some examples are, I tried making his chin and hair move down a bit each frame, as well as changing the angle of his ears, and obviously I moved his facial features to match his head movement. I wanted to try and work on the slow in and slow out principle of animation, but I believe there wasn't many places for me to attempt this with the few frames that I could work with and the few original parts of animation that I was working with. One place I tried to insert it was when Asa was breathing. I made the in-betweens of Asa's breathe in and breathe out a little bit shorter than her holding the breath, as to make it seem a little bit more natural and less robotic. I think it turned out okay, even though it is only 3 or 4 frames per breathing cycle. I was going to try to do the same thing with Denji's blinking, however I only made 3 frames, and I think any more than 3 frames would be too slow of a blink, so I just left it as 3 frames. Coloring was a pain because the fill tool seemed to be a bit buggy. but I think that's because of the small resolution and small lines I was working with. The fill tool just couldn't get a solid section to fill out. If it didn't fill out the whole canvas when I placed it, it would leave a small border between the lines that I drew and the filled area that I would have to go back and color in either way. But again, I believe this was because of the small lines and resolution I was using. I went back to the settings and tried to mess with the fill settings, like how strong the fill was, the smooth fill being on or off, and the gap closing setting for the fill, but none of those helped my situation. I figured the best way to color from here was to use the selection tool and add the colors on a separate layer. If there were more colors in this animation, it would have been much more tedious. On a side note, I didn't realize until writing this script that there were actually filled brushes which automatically fill in whatever area or shape that you draw. I ended up making my own fill brush after I figured that out, so if I run into this problem again next time, I think that fill brush will be even easier than the selection tool. Since it was my first time using any sort of timeline, I was really messy and all over the place with my animation layer. I ended up having everything start from the 0, 0 mark, and it was all just overlapping each other. It was really easy to organize since it was kind of just dragging and dropping everything into the right place. I think next time though, I want to try and animate scenes in the correct place and order, since when everything is overlapping each other, I had to toggle the visibility of all the other layers I wasn't working on to actually work on the layer I needed. One of the last things was inserting the audios and timing the clips to the audio. The only way for me to insert audio into this program was to use the Files app on the iPad, and I didn't have the files for each audio clip. I just had screen recordings of each audio. I ended up opting to just insert the videos with the sounds needed and place the videos under all the other layers and outside of the working canvas, just to make sure that they didn't show up. Finally was exporting. Now exporting is normally as simple as pressing a save button and saving it to your photos. However, when I was first making this animation, I could not decide if I wanted to do a landscape animation like it is currently, or if I wanted to do a vertical style of animation. So I kept changing the resolution of the canvas. When it finally came time to export, I tried to crop the canvas back to where I wanted it to be, but every time I tried to crop the canvas, also would get chopped in half and all of her layers would only be her legs moving. I think it's because I moved her layers around so much near the beginning of the animation. What I ended up doing was exporting it as is and just cropping the video in the Photos application. And finally, after all that, I completed what I would consider my first animation, or at least practice animation.
Huh?
I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I think it was kind of funny, although I do think that there's a few things I could have done better, such as the staging of Asa, Denji, and Yoru in the first scene, as well as the smoothness of some of the animation scenes, and getting more comfortable with the program as to not run into as many bugs. Although I'm gonna try and improve on those on the next one. I already have some ideas for what I want to do in my next animation and what I want to achieve and test out in animation. Coming to the end of this video, I'm hoping I covered everything that I wanted to cover, and I hope I'm going to keep up with this. Again, I don't normally make videos like this, and there's a lot more planning to make a video like this, so we'll see if I keep up with it. If you're someone out there who knows animation, or just has any general tips for me, even if it's about video making, please let me know down below. This is all still new to me, so almost anything is new information and is very helpful, so anything is much appreciated. Hopefully you enjoyed watching me try to learn some animation, and hopefully I can make another video like this soon. If you do want to see more videos like this and some more animations or art that I make, like the video and subscribe to me down below. It really means a lot. Also, before this video ends, as I was making this video, my channel hit 5,000 subs. I don't think that video and content creation is something that I would have gave up on, so I always push for goals like this, but I never expected it to happen so fast. So I just wanted to say thank you for all the support. Thank you for watching, and I hope you stick around for more videos.